Alex Greenwich, you've been at the forefront of the campaign for Australian marriage equality. Why is it such an important issue to you?
For me, it's as simple as being able to have the right to marry the person you love in the country that you love. I got involved in the campaign because I didn't like the fact that there was a law that said because I was gay, I was not able to get married. So many people support this reform for many reasons, but for me it's a very personal one.
Obviously, many countries such as New Zealand, South Africa and now Ireland have marriage equality. Why is Australia so slow to get involved and adopt it?
Well, a majority of Australians support reform, but we know, unlike other countries, we can't achieve the reform by legal action, or we can't achieve the reform by referendum. It has to be an act of Parliament. And to get it through Parliament, we need all sides of politics to work together. Sadly, that doesn't always happen in Australia, but it is starting to happen now. So I'm confident we'll see marriage equality happen sooner than later.
You mentioned a referendum. Obviously, Ireland's just had a successful referendum regarding marriage equality. What do you say to those who demand that Australia has something similar?
Well, a referendum can't achieve marriage equality in Australia. Referendums are for constitutional issues alone. In the High Court decision of the ACT versus the federal government, it made it quite clear that the Constitution would allow for same-sex marriage, but it would require an act of Parliament to achieve that. So a referendum would not be appropriate in this space because they are reserved for constitutional issues. Marriage equality would be achieved through legislation.
Now, Australians, many of them say that marriage is a federal issue. So why do so many state MPs, such as yourself, get involved?
Well, indeed, we've had some pretty good expert advice to say that it is possible to legislate for same-sex marriage at a state level. And indeed, we pursued that in New South Wales. Sadly, we lost by one vote. But the focus is very much on the federal level. I think why there are so many state MPs, though, that continue to be vocal supporters of reform is MPs, like myself, know that this is an issue that is important to many of our constituents, and it's important that we advocate for it. You know, if we have a look at the Liberal Party, some of the first people in the Liberal Party to come out in support of marriage equality were actually state Liberal MPs, people like Bruce Notley-Smith and people like Don Harwood.
You just mentioned the Liberals. How important is it that Liberals get involved, and to what extent do you think they influence the Prime Minister?
Well, you know, the Greens have always been a strong supporter of marriage equality. The two independents in the federal parliament, Andrew Wilkie and Cathy McGowan, are also strong supporters of marriage equality. And Labor, almost everyone in the Labor Party will be voting for the reform. You know, a handful of people won't, but we still don't have the numbers. The final numbers will be delivered by the Liberal and National Party, and we know there are people working very hard behind the scenes in the Liberal and National parties to get this through. They're key to the reform. Marriage equality it will be very hard to achieve marriage equality if Liberal and National members aren't allowed to vote in favour of it.
What do you say to those MPs who are unsure where they stand on the issue?
I think for those who are unsure, it's important that they consult with their constituents, with their LGBTI constituents, and across the board. We know that many Australians have already had the conversation about marriage equality, and they've ended up in a destination of supporting reform because they believe everybody should be treated equally under the law, and they know, that their gay friends or neighbours or colleagues are just the same as them and should be treated just the same as them under the law.
How realistic do you think it is that Australia could have marriage equality within the next couple of years?
Oh, I think it's very realistic. You know, there's a good chance we could have it by the end of this year. We're very close. We're a handful of votes away in the federal lower house to reform happening. We know it's very likely that we have the numbers already in the Senate. Today, Ricky Muir, the Motor Enthusiast Party senator, came out in support of reform. He's obviously a key person. So I think there's a good chance. If we don't get it this year, it'll probably be an issue that will then be taken to the next federal election, and we would have to wait to the next formation of government before we can have another crack at this.
What influence do non-politicians like Alan Jones have on our leadership?
It's interesting, you know, in New Zealand, marriage equality really started to build a lot of momentum when a lot of the shock jocks came out in support of reform. So Alan Jones coming out strongly in support of marriage equality, Andrew Bolt saying the argument has been won, and a number of other conservative commentators saying it's going to happen. I think that that's a pretty good indication that we could have marriage equality soon, because federal politicians, particularly conservative politicians, listen a lot to these guys.
How do you reassure those who oppose marriage equality on, say, cultural, religious or traditional grounds?
I guess I say to them, we come in peace. People are fighting for the right to marry because they value the institution of marriage. They want to enjoy and celebrate everything that comes with marriage in terms of the commitment, the respect for your partner, being together to the exclusion of everybody else, and the strong bond that a marriage creates in a relationship, as it does in my marriage to my husband Victor. And I guess I would also say to them that this reform is not about forcing churches to marry same-sex couples if they don't want to. There's plenty of exemptions throughout the proposed legislation which would protect clergy who didn't want to marry same-sex couples from having to do so.
You married your partner in Argentina. How did it feel coming back to Australia and not having your marriage recognised?
Look, it was quite hard actually. We had a wonderful celebration, and our celebration in Buenos Aires was with all of our friends and family, and it was a really special occasion. And we had a great feeling after our wedding. We had a feeling that we are a married couple, that we were really bonded together for life, and that was a wonderful thing. It was also a celebration of the way in which our friends and families from around the world accept us and see us as equal to any of our straight friends or family. So that was also wonderful. But to come back here and not have our marriage legally recognised obviously was upsetting, but it really strengthened my resolve to fight for the reform. And as an MP, I've been able to successfully get New South Wales to recognise overseas same-sex marriages in our Relationships Registry Act.
What do you say to those who oppose marriage equality on the grounds that perhaps it is a patriarchal institution or outdated?
I don't really understand those arguments. That's an argument probably more against marriage than it is an argument against same-sex marriage.
Do you think then there's a danger that it perhaps entrenches any divide between partners who are unmarried and those who are married in any way?
I don't think so. I think that every couple, gay or straight, wants to go on their own journey and set the rules for their own relationship. Currently, same-sex couples are denied that ability to be legally married in Australia, and that's an option that many relationships want to have.
There are some people who suggest that perhaps marriage equality, once we have it, the fight for gay rights is over. How do you react?
Oh, I would disagree with that. There's still a lot of work to do. Today I went to the launch of the Human Rights Commission's report on sexual orientation, gender issues and intersex issues. And throughout that document, there's a number of areas where we need a lot of improvements in the whole space of LGBTI law reform. So things like ending forced surgical intervention for people changing sex. We need to obviously end the anti-discrimination exemptions that allow private schools to actively discriminate against gay students and teachers. So there's a lot of work to do, and then there's also a lot of work to do in support in terms of mental health issues, in terms of domestic violence within our community. There's always going to be a lot of work to do, and even just if we are able to achieve marriage equality, to protect that from being repealed. Legislation has never successfully been repealed in any other country, but that doesn't mean it won't happen here.
Leading on from that answer, why has there been so much focus on marriage equality and, say, not other forms of discrimination?
It's interesting. I found in New South Wales Parliament that we've been able to focus on a number of LGBTI issues and are going to continue to do that. But certainly when it comes to gay law reform, the national narrative is strongly focused on marriage equality. And I think that's probably because it goes to the core of many Australians, and you want so many people want to be in a relationship. They seek to have that partner, to find that partner for life, and we know that that's important to someone. And we also are a country that really values equality. So many Australians out there see that there's, gay and lesbian couples are treated almost as second-class citizens, and that doesn't resonate well with them. I think, people understand marriage, people understand discrimination, and people understand equality, and that's why this is such a straightforward issue that has dominated the national narrative for so long.
Some people who identify as transgendered fear they may not be included in any marriage equality laws. Can you reassure them?
Well, the important thing here is that the Marriage Act is about two people. So regardless of sex or gender identity, that it doesn't define male and female, that it is about two people. The other key concern for the trans community is about ending the process of forced divorce. So once the Marriage Act is amended to allow for marriage equality, we'll actually need to then amend state laws to end the requirement that a partner will have to divorce their other partner to be able to get their identity documents. So it's actually a requirement of state law that we'll need to fix up once the Federal Marriage Act is amended. But the Federal Marriage Act is about the equality of relationships, and the whole LGBTI rainbow needs to be included in that.
What can Australians do to get more involved?
I think it's really important that people build a relationship with their MPs and senators on this reform and talk to them, have conversations with them. And if your MP or your senators are all in support of marriage equality, talk to your friends and family members who live in electorates where they could have an MP who's not supportive of it or is undecided. This is a reform that's won conversation by conversation and vote by vote.
Alex Greenwich, thank you very much.
Thank you.